This is something you guys have been begging me to cover for ages. And trust me, it took a lot of digging. But I finally found 3 stories that unfold during full-on school lockdowns. This first one happened on what started as just another dull, dragging day in calculus. It was Friday, 7th period, the last class before spring break. You could practically feel the anticipation buzzing in the air. Everyone was restless, jittering in their seats like we were caged animals waiting for the final bell to set us free. Unlike a bunch of my friends who were stuck sweating through last-minute tests, we didn't have one that day. Our teacher, the chill kind who never took things too seriously, had other plans. Right in the middle of class, he just shrugged and started letting us play quizzes on Sporkle.com. It was his style, super laid back, the kind of teacher who would rather connect with us than crack the whip. We were in the middle of some brand logo quiz, you know the type, guess the company from the symbol. The classroom had settled into that rare, oddly peaceful kind of hum. Fingers tapping on keyboards, a few quiet laughs here and there. The fluorescent lights above buzzed softly, mixing with the distant echo of lockers slamming from another hallway. And then, I remember the moment exactly. It was right after my friend answered a question. I even remember the exact answer he typed in: Adidas. That was when everything started to unravel. That's when the dean's voice suddenly crackled through the loudspeaker. He didn't sound calm, not at all. His voice came through panicked, frantic, on the edge of losing control. All teachers, this is not a drill. Lock down your classrooms now. The second he said it, a chill ran down my spine. It was like my body knew before my brain did. Every hair on my arm stood on end, and I felt that cold rush of fear ripple through me. Even our laid-back teacher, the one who never flinched about anything, looked visibly shaken. He snapped into action, bolting to the light switch and killing the overheads. The room plunged into a dim half-shadow. "Everyone, back corner, now," he whispered, waving us over. His voice was tight, hurried, no jokes, no calm. We scrambled to the far corner of the room and sat there pressed together in silence. No one dared speak. 2 minutes passed, maybe less, but it felt longer, like time had frozen. That's when it happened. The faint electronic hum we always heard from a panel in the back of the room, the one we'd gotten so used to it had become background noise, suddenly cut out. A flat silence swallowed everything. They'd killed the power. Now we were all looking at each other, no one saying a word, but we knew. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't just someone pulling a fire alarm or a confused visitor. This was real. And then the nightmare started. From somewhere down the hallway, we heard it, a man screaming at the top of his lungs. The kind of scream that shoots through your body before your brain can even register it. Not just angry, deranged. 2 girls near me started quietly crying, which somehow made everything 10 times worse. Fear spreads like wildfire, and their tears lit the match. The screaming was getting closer, louder. Then, bang! He started slamming lockers as he passed, shouting wild, unhinged threats that echoed through the corridor. "I'll kill all of you!" That's when it hit me. This wasn't just some maniac outside the school. He was in the hallway. He was here. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest. My throat was dry. My hands had gone cold and numb. Our teacher frantically motioned for silence, his finger pressed to his lips. We all turned to each other, trying to read one another's expressions in the dark, searching for reassurance that none of us could give. Then came the sound none of us were prepared for. The banging. It stopped slamming the lockers and shifted to our classroom door. Our door. And then one of the girls who had been crying broke. She screamed, "No!" The man outside started pounding harder. The door shook with every slam, each one louder than the last. "Open up!" he shrieked, voice cracking like it was tearing out of him. Two girls were sobbing now, loud enough that it felt impossible the man couldn't hear us. That moment, that stretch of time with him just beating on the door, screaming like a madman, it felt like we were frozen in an eternity of terror. I genuinely thought that was going to be the last moment of my life. And then, just like that, the banging stopped. We listened, frozen, as his footsteps moved away. His voice faded too, still screaming, still ranting like he had completely lost his grip on reality. And then, silence. But it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that weighs heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. And so were we. I'd guess it was around 10 minutes later when the loudspeaker finally crackled back to life. Though honestly, with how thick the tension had become in that room, it felt more like half an hour had passed. What was surprising, almost jarring actually, was that the dean came back on to explain what had happened. Usually they just left us in the dark until everything was all clear. But this time, he spoke. His voice was calmer than before, but you could still hear it, that lingering edge of anxiety, like he hadn't fully recovered from what went down. He told us that a man, someone apparently mentally unstable, had entered the building. The first person he encountered was the woman at the front desk, and he assaulted her. The dean didn't get into the details, but word was she ran out of the building screaming. From that point on, nobody really knew if the man was armed, and that was the terrifying part. This was before the school had cameras, before they had the budget for real security. No locked front entrances, no guards, just a door that opened and a man who walked through it. The staff did what they could. They swept the building, every hallway, every classroom, but they came up with nothing. He had simply vanished inside the school. So the dean gave instructions. Teachers were to resume teaching as best they could, but keep the doors locked. No one was to leave the room. No hall passes, no bathroom breaks, nothing. It felt surreal, like we were supposed to just pretend none of that had happened. But the worst part, the part that truly chilled me, didn't come until later. Word started spreading around school, whispered from one group to the next like a virus. One of the janitors, the guy who worked the night shift, had found the man. He was asleep, tucked away in one of the old storage closets at the far back end of the building, a place nobody really used anymore. And according to the rumors, and you know how fast those kinds of things spread, sticking out of the man's pocket was a .44 Magnum. That's what people said anyway. The janitor must have startled him somehow, maybe just opened the door without realizing. But by the time a police officer arrived on the scene, the man was already gone, slipped away like a ghost. No one in my class, at least not that I know of, ever found out what happened to him, whether he was arrested or just disappeared into the city. But I like to think, or maybe it's just hope, that wherever he is now, He's finally getting the help he needs. At my school, lunch is split into 2 separate periods. The first lunch is for all the 6th graders and some of the 7th graders. The second lunch is for the rest of the 7th grade and all of the 8th graders. The lockdown happened in early October. I remember that clearly. The day itself felt like something out of a movie. The sky was blanketed in thick gray clouds, and a steady rain had been falling all morning. Not heavy, just that cold, persistent drizzle that soaks into your skin and makes the whole world feel a little heavier than usual. It all went down during first lunch. I was standing there, minding my own business, when I heard it. 4 loud booms. They echoed across the campus like distant cannon blasts. At first, I brushed it off. Honestly, I thought it was just thunder rolling in. The sky certainly looked like it. But then, something weird happened. The entire lunch crowd screamed. Not just a few people. The whole area exploded into chaos. Screeching, shouts, trays clattering to the floor. I remember thinking, what the hell is wrong with these kids? I chalked it up to them just being overdramatic, freaking out over thunder like a bunch of scared little kids. But that's when campus security stormed in. They weren't calm. They weren't walking. They were yelling, frantic, barking at everyone to get inside the multi-purpose room immediately. Kids who were still in the lunch line, trays half loaded, wallets out, had to just drop their food right there and run. Some of them didn't even get to pay. Others had to toss their lunches in the trash before they even took a bite. Me and a few friends rushed into the room, along with what felt like a stampede of panicked students. Everyone was confused, curious, whispering. The multi-purpose room at our school is massive. It's the size of a gym, easily, with rows of foldable tables and high ceilings that somehow made it feel even more echoey and cold than the rain outside. But what really stands out, what I'll never forget, is the back wall of that room. It's made entirely of glass, a huge see-through wall that usually looks out into the courtyard. When we got inside, security was already moving fast, rushing to draw the massive curtains over the glass wall like they were trying to hide something. And they weren't alone. There were adults posted at every single exit. Faculty, staff, maybe even office workers I didn't recognize, all of them standing like guards. None of them were saying anything, just watching the exits, watching us. And that's when it really started to feel like something was wrong. Really, truly wrong. My friend Eric, like the rest of us, was buzzing with curiosity. The tension in the room was thick. Whispers flying, kids huddled together in clusters trying to figure out what was going on. So Eric, being the bold one in our group, decided to approach one of the adults guarding the exits and ask what was happening. When he came back, his face looked off, pale, kind of unsettled. "You know how right in front of TMS there's those houses?" he asked, keeping his voice low. "Yeah," I replied. "Well," Eric said, glancing around like he wasn't sure who was listening, "there's this mentally disabled guy, completely off his rocker. He barricaded himself inside his house and started threatening to commit suicide and said he'd kill the cops if they tried to evict him." My stomach twisted. Eric leaned in a little closer. Apparently, he was outside earlier, just walking around, staring at the kids on campus, watching them in this weird, creepy way. It was the way Eric said "watching" that sent a chill crawling down my back. But then came the part that made everything worse. Eric said the guy was a registered sex offender. Suddenly, the fear in the room made sense. The rushed lockdown, the drawn curtains, the guards at every exit. We were trapped in the multi-purpose room for a full hour. That's 2 full class periods gone. And the whole time, none of us knew if that man was still out there, if he had a weapon, if he was going to come onto campus. When the lockdown finally ended, or at least when they said it was safe enough to move, we weren't released all at once. Instead, they started escorting us out 1 classroom at a time, like we were being evacuated. That alone was unsettling. The quiet, controlled way they filtered us through the hallways, like they weren't sure if it was really over. Later that day, I found out something else. That man? He lived right next to my friend Brandy. When I asked her about it, her face turned stone cold. She told me about something that happened the previous Halloween. She had looked out her window and saw that same man standing behind his own window, cutting his arm. And then, using the blood, he started writing on the glass. The message was scrawled across his window in thick, dark red letters. "Don't come here or I'll kill you." Of course, it was Halloween, and at the time, everyone, including Brandy, figured it was some sick attempt at a decoration. But now, after what happened, we all knew the truth. That man wasn't pretending. He was mentally gone, a danger to himself and everyone around him. And we were just grateful he never made it through the glass doors that day. I'm 22 years old, fresh out of college, and I recently landed a job at my old high school. Kind of a full circle moment. The position? A computer intern, tucked away in the basement of the school. Now, let me tell you, that basement is a mess, chaotic, disorganized to the point that you're stepping over tangled cables, abandoned boxes, and forgotten pieces of tech from at least a decade ago. But deep in that cluttered maze, there's a little oasis, a small office space we call the 3 R's office. And it's nice, like surprisingly nice. 3 big, clean desks, 2 mini fridges, both fully stocked, a flat-screen TV mounted up on the wall like it's a lounge, and best of all, ice-cold, whisper-silent air conditioning, something the students and teachers up in the main building dream about during the hot months. Of course, it's also packed with school servers and all the other tech stuff, switches, routers, blinking lights, humming quietly in the background like a digital heartbeat. I got this gig thanks to 3 of my old computer teachers. They didn't just like me, they adored me back when I was a student. They were more than teachers to me, honestly, more like mentors, friends even. So when the job opened up, they pulled some strings and made it happen. I was grateful, still am. The work had been going great, chill, low stress, until a few weeks ago. That's when something happened. That day, my 2 co-workers, Dave and Gary, both older, decent guys, weren't in the office. They were upstairs working on paperwork or inventory or whatever it was they usually did when they weren't buried in cables with me. I was alone in the basement office, halfway through my lunch break, eating a sandwich at my desk. Everything felt normal, until my phone rang. It was one of the women from the front office. Her voice came through tight, sharp. "The school's on lockdown. Someone possibly armed has entered the building." My heart stopped for a second. I froze with the sandwich still in my hand. There wasn't much I could do. The irony hit me instantly. This office, as nice as it was, didn't even have a real door. Just a wide open entryway that looked out into the messy basement. And the main basement door? It didn't even have a working lock. So for my own safety, the only thing I could do was kill the lights. I turned off every light in the office, switched off my computer monitor. The hum of the servers still filled the silence, but visually, the room was swallowed in dimness. I sat down, phone in hand, and texted Gary and Dave, told them what I'd been told, asked where they were. No response. The silence stretched. I stayed in my chair, the only light now coming from my phone screen, playing dumb little games to keep myself calm. I waited there in the dark for what must have been 20 minutes. No call, no update, nothing. I had no idea what was happening above me. I couldn't hear a thing from the basement. No footsteps, no voices, no indication of what was going on in the hallways above. And I wasn't allowed to make any calls, not until the front office gave the all clear. So I just sat there, alone, in the dark, waiting. Then, the sound that made my blood run cold. The basement door creaked open. It was loud, louder than it had ever sounded before. The rusty hinges groaned, and the sound echoed through the open, cluttered space of the basement, bouncing off pipes and server racks until it reached my little office like a warning. I sat up straight, frozen in place. My first thought was that maybe it was Gary or Dave finally coming back. I felt a brief flash of relief, followed quickly by a sick sense of dread. Should I call out? Would they answer? Before I could decide, I heard it. Footsteps. Fast, urgent. Someone came running down the basement stairs. Hard soles slapping against concrete. Whoever it was, they weren't walking casually. They were rushing. The footsteps came closer, echoing down the hallway, growing louder until they reached the threshold of the office. I didn't wait. My chair scraped the floor as I shoved it back, then dropped to my knees and scrambled under the desk, heart pounding like a jackhammer in my chest. Whoever entered the office didn't turn on the lights. They just stood there. Silence. Crushing, absolute silence. I can't even describe the fear I felt in that moment. It was the kind of primal terror that seizes your entire body. Like your instincts are screaming, "Don't move, don't breathe, don't exist." I felt like if I even blinked too loud, I'd be dead. Then, ding, my phone lit up. A text message. The cheerful little tone rang out like a gunshot in the dark. I felt my entire soul shrivel in on itself. My jaw clenched, my muscles locked. And then, footsteps. They were moving again, toward me, getting closer. Each step felt heavier than the last, each one pounding against the floor, like it was counting down the final moments of my life. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I lunged out from under the desk, heart racing, breath catching, and threw my hands up in surrender. "Please, don't kill me," I blurted out, voice cracking from the panic. And that's when someone grabbed my arm and pulled me to my feet. A man stood in front of me. He looked normal, calm even. Red plaid button-up, faded jeans, a reddish-black cap pulled low over his face. His grip was firm, but not aggressive. "It's okay," he said quietly. "I'm just down here hiding with you." His voice was steady, too steady. "What's going on up there?" I whispered, trying to catch my breath, hoping for any sort of answer, for something to make sense. But he didn't really answer. He just looked around the darkened office and said, "Is there an exit down here?"
Something about his tone, the way he skipped over my question, sent a chill slithering down my spine. Still, I nodded slowly and pointed toward the hallway. "Yeah, around that way." He started to move, but before he could take another step, I stopped him. "Wait," I asked, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Who are you?" There was a pause, just a brief, hanging moment of silence. Then the man finally spoke. He told me he had come to the school to pick up his son, just a normal afternoon, when, out of nowhere, a teacher urgently pulled him aside and told him to hide. His voice was calm, steady, the kind of calm that didn't feel quite right in this situation. I nodded slowly, trying to process what he'd said.
My heart was still pounding, but my mind was spinning even faster. I needed to ground myself, so I glanced down at my phone, the one that had nearly gotten me killed moments earlier, and finally checked the message that had come in. It was from Dave. "Dude, this is fucking crazy. Some guy with a gun shot Mr. Buckley. He's wearing a red shirt and hat. Whatever you do, don't come upstairs." My blood ran cold. I read it again, slower this time, as the words seemed to sharpen with each passing second. Red shirt. Hat. I felt my throat tighten. Almost on instinct, I glanced up from the screen. The man in front of me? Red plaid shirt, reddish black cap. And in that instant, I felt my stomach sink like a stone. I didn't say a word. But he noticed. He saw the way I suddenly tensed, the way my eyes locked on him like I'd just figured something out I was never supposed to know. His expression shifted, ever so slightly, just a flicker of awareness. I could feel the air change. Something inside me screamed, "Run, now!" And I did. I turned and sprinted toward the stairs, legs barely functioning, lungs already burning. Then, bang! A gunshot ripped through the basement. The deafening crack echoed off the concrete walls, and I heard the unmistakable metallic ping as the bullet ricocheted off something nearby in the darkness. Sparks flew, my ears rang. But somehow, thank God, the bullet missed. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I flew up those stairs like my life depended on it, because it did. Bursting through the basement door, I stumbled into the hallway, gasping for breath, wide-eyed with panic. And there they were, police officers, armed, ready, positioned at every exit, including the basement entrance. I barely had time to point behind me before they swarmed. The second that man opened the basement door, they were on him. Tackled, disarmed, arrested. It was over. More good news followed later. Mr. Buckley survived. He'd been shot, yes, but somehow he pulled through. It turned out the man had some kind of beef with him. No one ever explained exactly what it was about. The school never released details. No clear motive, no official reasoning. Just rumors. But those of us who knew Mr. Buckley, we all agreed. There's no way he could have done anything that deserved something like this. Whatever happened between them, it had festered into something dark and twisted. And I know one thing for certain. That single gunshot, the one that shattered the silence of the basement, will echo in my mind for the rest of my life.